So the next thing that we need to bring in is the original shape of the remote. Now the process that we're looking at here is going to assume that somebody took the time to make the original shape and then we decided to add this LCD. So we want to bring in the original shape and we're not going to copy it exactly, but we want to use it as a reference. So in order to do this, we're going to go to the import option on create. So once we select import, we're going to grab the remote body rev1 and we're going to open it. Now in this case, again, we have solids and surfaces, and in this case, I know that we're just going to hit OK, leaving the default settings again. Now because both of these were designed at the origin in their respective files, they come in perfectly. But notice that, again, we're in a part file, so they're not in assembly, they're not just able to free drag. But we do have two solid bodies. We have a top and a bottom. So let's go ahead and select solid 3 and turn it off. So we can see that inside of this file, we have the basis for the bottom of the remote. It has the PCB that does fit inside of it, and all the information is there. Now we're not going to be too worried with the bottom of this. We're really focusing on the top shape. So we can go ahead and we can turn the visibility of solid 3 back on, and we could hide solid 4. Now what we want to do is we want to modify the appearance of this so that it has some translucency with it. Now there are a few different ways that we can do this, but I'm going to select it and I'm just going to go up to a material up here that has some opacity to it. So we're going to go up to do a clear blue so we can still see it. We still get a good idea about where this information is, but we can see through it and see all the underlying information that we need. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to create a remote that matches this outside profile and blends up so that we can have a nice flat face where the LCD is going to be. So in order to do this process, we're going to start by adding a new sketch. So we're going to find our origin, we're going to find our XZ plane, and we're going to start a new sketch on it. Now the first thing that I want to do is I want to project geometry. Now I know that this geometry is actually on the same plane, but I still want to project it and note where this goes. So this is where our, in this case, our XZ plane is, but that's not where I want to start sketching. So I'm going to finish the sketch. I'm going to delete it. And we can do one of two things. We can either create an offset plane, or because this is actually planar, we can start a new sketch directly on that face. We can grab the outside edge and we can project it. So this is going to be the starting point or the reference for what we're creating. Now, in this case, the remote is going to be symmetric, assuming that this LCD is completely centered on the file. Now, of course, we can measure it, but everything does look to be centered. So what I want to do is create a straight line going from top to bottom, making sure it's snapping to this geometry. And I want to make sure that it goes through the origin. Now, I don't currently see the origin, so I want to make sure that I hide solid 1. And I'm going to make sure that my origin is visible. And I want to make sure that I have a coincident relationship with the origin and this line. And notice that when I zoom in, we have a slight offset with this coordinate system. My axes, my origin, everything else is in the right spot. But the coordinate system or the information that came in from some of the other solids look to be a little bit off. So we want to make sure that we're not too concerned with that. You want to make sure that you're in a top view, and we're going to make sure that we're actually centered here. Now, how are we going to make sure that we're actually centered here? Well, in order to do that, I'm going to add a reference line. It's going to be horizontal. I'm going to go from here to here. And I'm going to use this point as a measurement reference. So I'm going to go from here to this line and see that we're 0.968 and some change. Then I'm going to go from this point to this line, and notice that we're 976. All right, so not exactly centered. So that is going to produce a problem for us, and this is definitely something that we need to make sure that we fix and adjust. This imported body didn't come in exactly centered on our surrounding geometry. So again, this is something that we need to fix. We need to make sure that we address it now before we start creating our geometry, because we want to make sure that our geometry is symmetric, so we only have to model half of it. So let's go ahead and finish this sketch. let's take a look at solid 1 because solid 1 is also going to be important. We want to make sure that that thing is completely in the center of our file as well. So inside here, we're going to go to inspect. We're going to turn on some of our planes. So we're going to show our YZ plane. We're going to use that as a reference. So we want to measure from the YZ plane to the board edge. Notice that we're 0.65. And then we want to measure, again, we'll go from this point, we're 0.65. So the board itself is completely centered, but the shape of the remote is not. So that's okay because, again, we're not too concerned with the actual geometry of the remote. We just want to make sure what we're making is symmetric in itself. So now that we know that the remote itself is going to be centered because we're basing it off the PCB, we can move forward.